Welcome back to another episode of Theology, Curator. My name is Kurt Willems, and I am so happy to be with you. I wanted to share with you about today's episode. It's with my friend Beth Leach. Oh my gosh, she is one of the most gifted preachers and teachers and communicators of God's holy scriptures that I know. She's also just a real authentic human being, a great leader, a great pastor. And so I'm really pumped on sharing this interview. And here's why. Her book is powerful. She wrote a book called Radiant Church, and I can't recommend it enough. In fact, I wrote an endorsement for it that gives you an idea. I'm going to read you my endorsement of the book before we get into this interview. What I said was, no doubt about it, Christianity has a bad reputation problem in the USA, but that is not how it's supposed to be. The scriptures offer us a vocation to be people who bear the loving light of God. In Radiant Church, Beth Leach does something radical. She looks at Jesus first, the light of the world in human flesh. Jesus calls us to know him and live like him in such a way that radical love should be what we are known for, not bigotry, hypocrisy, patriarchy, polarization, racism, political ideology, or any other negatively loaded label. Rather than watering down the Bible to make Christianity more palatable for our culture, she invites us to drink deeply of its story, to become people known for radiating God's beauty and goodness to our world. Read this prophetic book, and let's take up the abundant resources of Jesus together so we can put his vision of a radiant church on full display. Friends, I stand by every word of that endorsement, which is why I'm so excited to present this interview to you. I also want to just remind you that Echoing Hope, How the Humanity of Jesus Redeems Our Pain, is available right now for pre-order at echoinghope.com. Beth was so kind to endorse that and many others, including Scott McKnight, Brian Zond, Jonathan Martin, Lois Turveberg, and many others, Oshita Moore, Sarah Bessie. Man, there's so many people who have come alongside and supported my project. So I'm really, really just honored by that. So hope you'll check it out at echoinghope.com, and I hope you'll check out this interview.
Welcome to Theology Curator, a podcast hosted by Kurt Willems and available online at theologycurator.com. Each episode looks at a theological, formational, or cultural theme. We might dig into the life and letters of a radical Jewish teacher named Paul, converse about a pressing contemporary issue, reflect on the nature of following Jesus today, or even attempt to remedy doom and gloom preaching with a good old-fashioned dose of hope. This show is an invitation to build bridges between the first century world of the earliest Christ followers into the 21st century reality we now inhabit. The Jesus we excavate from the rubble of tradition might just surprise us all.
All right, my friends, I am sitting here with Beth Leach, who is a pastor, an author, really a church leader that I've followed for many years and is becoming a friend. And that's also pretty rad. And she has a book coming out called Radiant Church in February the 16th, if I remember correctly.
You got it.
Yeah, awesome. Well, welcome to you, and excited to be able to talk about Jesus and Radiant Church stuff. It's awesome.
Thank you, Kurt. I am so excited to be here, and I've been following you for so long, and I'm just so glad I can finally see you and talk to you face to face. And hey, I am so excited about your book.
Oh, hey. Oh, that's so cool. Thank you. I appreciate that. You were kind enough to write a little blurb, and it's been
your book. Yeah.
Oh, that's amazing. Well, we're here to talk about you. So that's pretty exciting. I want to hear about your story a little bit. You have been in ministry for quite a while and written another book that people may be familiar with, Emboldened. And I've just found out have another book coming out later called 40 Days on Being a Six, which I'm super pumped about as well. How did you get to the writing part of your life, and how has ministry sort of informed kind of your story?
Yeah. So I feel like, my journey to writing was born out of pastoring. I am a pastor first a shepherd that loves the local church, loves Jesus, and wants to see the church be the church. And so anything I've ever written has been for the church and hoping that we can be who Jesus actually believes we can be. And so, the first book, Emboldened, just came out of just this burning passion to see the church live into her fullness, to flourish as women and men partnered together. And I just was so burdened that I saw women sidelined. I saw that the church living out of its power halfway. And that we were missing half the church. And so, and then, Radiant Church as well the second book came about from a similar burden. I had been pastoring Paznaz for 2 years. We had been through my first year at Paznaz. Within the first 7 days, 600 people left the church because I'm a female. And it was a very gendered experience. We went through the election, and that was hell pastoring. And I'm sure any pastor who's listening right now is nodding their heads and, don't want to relive that. But actually, we kind of have relived it over and over and over, as it seems like things have been unraveling worse since then. And so it was October of 2018. I sat down in a coffee shop in Mammoth, and I had been sitting around a campfire with one of my girlfriends. We were on a camping trip, our two families, and I was just lamenting over what I was seeing in the church. On one end, I was lamenting at what was just to me so clear. The church had been participating in just systems that were broken and sinful and harmful and hurting people. And on the other end was people that were just angry with the church for good reason. They were hurting, they were broken, and they were leaving the church, and they were done with the church altogether.
Wow. Yeah.
And so I just wanted to kind of stand there in the middle of these two groups and on one hand say, let's look at the mirror and see who we've become and how diminished our witness is. And then I wanted to look at the other group and say, this God who sees us in all of our brokenness, and this God who sees us in just all of this chaos still calls us and believes in us. And I wanted to, just call us to a fresh vision, something new, and a different root system, if you will. In chapter 2, I talk about just how we've rooted ourselves in the wrong story. The story of idolatry, the idolatry of success, idolatry of nationalism, idolatry of individualism. And this is the tree that has been coming out of this root system. And what would happen if we actually rerouted ourselves in God's story?
Wow.
Imagine that witness. And so that was a really long answer. I'm a preacher, so I get a lot of words from me. I say words.
This is my favorite part of doing interviews, is hearing other people's thoughts come out, because I'm the same way.
Yes.
No, it's good. It's good.
Former assistant used to tell me I have a gift of gab. So you may need to but so I just, it's a burden. I love the church, and I believe in the church, and I'm sad for the church.
Yeah. It resonates with my experience in so many ways. Being a pastor here in Seattle, we attracted a lot of the folks that are burnt out, so on that one, if you were to look at our community historically, we have less folks who maybe have been part of the sort of public way that the church's witness has been damaged lately with politics and these things. And more of the people who are like, we're not sure this is for us anymore. We're kind of done. And I've said this elsewhere, but the election of Trump and all the stuff that led to that, I saw so many people just walk away from the Lord. This can't be credible. If that person who has followed Jesus their entire life can be this way, then I can't be part of this. It must be fake, And so I, on so many levels, love the church like you love the church, and desire just so much that we can become something. Last night I was lamenting, and I'm not good at this. This is a practice that I'm learning.
Yes.
But I was driving, and it's super personal, I guess, but I was on my way to Sprouts, and in the parking lot where this new Sprouts is. We're doing Whole30 right now. I need some Whole30-ish things. My gut is struggling. Oh my gosh. And so I went in there and I was like, oh my gosh, this is like a keto Whole30 dream center. I had no idea. But in that same parking lot is the animal hospital where, as you know from my book, Sadie passed away. And so all those feelings are coming up. We had a neighbor lose a dog this week. And I'm just like, and it's helping me tap into all of the other stuff, all of the other pain and brokenness that I'm holding with so many. And I was just like, God, why is Christianity this way right now? Like, why have we lost our way? Is there ever going to be a day when we're known for the beauty and goodness of who you are again? And so your book captures that in such a profound way. And I just appreciate that you're putting this into the world because we need this more than ever. And hearing your story about what led you to write it as a pastor. I mean, I think there's a lot of great authors out there that have insights to Christianity and faith and formation that may not be pastors, but there's something about that pastoral concern that causes some pastors to go into those spaces like you did in this book that I think are really healthy and humanizing for readers. And so as I think about all of that, now I'm ranting. As I think about all of that.
Thank you. I love hearing that back. That's encouraging.
Oh, so much. So I'm thinking of Jesus right now, and your book, it really starts kind of framing the problem and why your experience has led you to write Radiant Church. And, you get to chapter 3 and we're talking about reclaiming a radiant Jesus. I'm wondering for listeners, if you could talk about like what radiant Jesus are you referring to? I think there's a lot of people that would just hear the phrase, for instance, we want Jesus to be radiant or lifted high or majestic. And I know that's not what you're doing in that fluffy sense. So help us reclaim some of that vision that you unpack in the book about Jesus himself.
Yeah. I think, when we look to the Jesus in Scripture, when we read the Sermon on the Mount, when we read about, just beginning with Matthew and this great genealogy, and we see this continuum in the story of God, that something has finally arrived. The story has arrived. We're there. And then, we come to this child in a manger. We read, and Luke, he says, I've come to preach good news to the poor. He opens a scroll, and he said, it's fulfilled today. And then in the Sermon on the Mount, when Jesus says, he says, do not think that your righteousness is greater. How does he word it? In Matthew 5:21, he says, your righteousness needs to be greater than that of the Pharisees.
Yes.
Don't think that I've come to abolish the law, but I've come to fulfill it. And then from there, as he proclaims himself as the fulfillment of the law, he sets himself up as his authority. And he begins to teach some really hard and crazy things.
Yeah.
Love your enemy. Or turn the other cheek. Pray for those who persecute you. Blessed are those who mourn. Blessed are those who are persecuted. And then we see Jesus, move through the Gospels of eating and dining with all of the wrong people. He's including all the people in which the religious elite said he should not include, and he welcomes them and he calls them all to come. And he journeys faithfully all the way to the cross, lays his life down. And then we see, this on the cross, we see this just radiance or the love of God on full display.
Yeah.
Like, it is there on full display in such an upside down, unexpected way. Always. Jesus, always so unexpected. From the resurrection into the ascension. And Jesus, in his life, he proclaims, like, if you want to know what God is like, look to me. And in Hebrews, we see that he is the radiance of God's glory. So when I talk about like the radiance of Jesus, talking about how the heart of God is like fully on display.
Mm-hmm.
And our call, if we want to be a radiant church, so because I wrote this book in hopes that we can cast a vision for what it means to be a radiant church, our call then is to take our cues from the radiant Jesus, who is in the radiance of God's glory. This Jesus who calls all to come at the table. This Jesus who says, pray for those who persecute you, turn the other cheek, blessed are the poor. He's come to bring good news to the poor. Blessed are those who mourn, and on and on and on and on. That we as the church, our witness ought to look a lot like that.
Yeah.
And I contend that it's kind of a far cry these days. It's pretty diminished. It's a weakened witness.
You absolutely nailed it when it comes to that beautiful radical vision of Jesus. The fact that God could become human and then show us the best way to be human, just really comes through in what you've said. And it's a huge calling. You know, you talk about how our witness is diminished right now in so many ways. And I have one quote I want to share during our interview, and I don't even know if it's the best quote in the book or not, but rather it just kind of captures this idea that you just shared. And I think centralizes maybe the next couple of questions I have here. You say, if Jesus is king, then those who live in the kingdom ought to live as the king calls us to live. That is, as kingdoms of his radiant kingdom. Citizens of the kingdom look a lot like the king, loving, kind, selfless, and cruciform. I mean, it's such a direct capture of this radiant Jesus that you do here. And it leads me to ask, like, where have we struggled? Like, as a Christian community, and some of this is like, you know, giving you a platform to say things that other people are already thinking, but help us frame that a little bit. You know, we've outwardly just straight up failed in our calling to be radiant. And there's that reality. And then there's this added reality that some of the people contributing to this problem are people that you and I and others love dearly. Yes. And it's like, okay, I'm saying that there is a huge problem. People I respect and who are godly by other measures, perhaps even, they're missing the mark in this very public, specific way.
Yes.
How do we start having that conversation, both and not analyzing the problem and then inviting people to the solution? Yeah.
We have to get really bold and vulnerable and open to name the systems that we are just so entrapped in and entangled in. And you know, some of those, I mean, we could talk for hours about what those are, and the conversations are out there. This is nothing new. But I think some of it is our metrics. It comes down to our metrics. We have bowed down to the altar of success, and what we measure as success, and the ways that we have elevated this vision, very Western North American vision of what success is. It's become the golden calf of today. Because that has been the God that we've been worshiping, we have a very deformed image of Christians. And, you know, I just think so much of this crisis that we're in is a formational crisis. We are being formed away from the likeness of Christ. We are actually being deformed. And a lot of it has to do with just this, what we elevate as arrival, what we elevate as success, what we elevate as good. You know, what we saw recently with Hillsong and Carl. I mean, there was an idolatry of success there. So many, and that was what was measured, and that was what was elevated, that so many things just went unchecked because we were measuring the wrong thing. We were looking at the wrong thing.
Wow. And I think there's a lot to be said about that success issue. You know, as a pastor, you've had to navigate some really challenging waters as a woman, especially.
Yeah.
And I can't imagine, although I want to continue learning, but I can't actually imagine in my situation as a guy and, all of that. But like being as gifted, and I'm not trying to like give you hot air, but being as gifted as you clearly are, and then being told no in the midst of like clear spirit-derived giftedness, and what that does to churches all over the place, who success looks like a muscular dude who says really good jokes, who is good at getting people at the end of every message to say a prayer, and now they're evangelistic. They get to know celebrities, whatever that dynamic that so many people look for in the stereotypical church and pastor environment in North America. And this isn't me like throwing, and you weren't either, throwing Carl under the bus as much. I mean, I think you and I both would agree, like there's so much to be grieved there. I mean, on so many levels. And yet here we are in the 21st century, and success metrics, be they about stereotypical leaders, be they about outward appearances. I've been in church environments on staff, younger versions of myself, where it was all about the outward appearance.
Oh yeah. I've been told before that. I remember sitting with another female pastor much older than me. And she said to me, she said, well, you have the look. You have the look. And she said it in like a way that was just positive. You have the look that, you're going to be able to do okay. And I just thought, what's the look?
Yeah.
what's the look?
Yeah. Yeah. And clearly there's so many more factors than raw giftedness, Jesus centrality, that are at work, whether it be about a pastor's gender or look or what have you, or about racial things or about ministry metrics. I mean, there's so many things that we can lump into what people consider success and Christian faith.
Yeah.
Talk about run with any of those rabbit trails. But the theme being, how does it co-opt our calling as a church?
Yeah. Yeah. I think we've elevated these metrics above faithfulness. And faithfulness has been co-opted. I think that we've elevated success at the expense of faithfulness.
Right. And
we're so blind to it. We can't even see the ways that I don't even know, like if we're asking, what is the faithful thing to do?
Yeah.
We're asking, what's the win? Right? What's the success? What lever do I need to pull to get this to happen? What lever do we need to pull to get butts in the seat to have a really full sanctuary? I think, I talk about in the introduction, Willow Creek is just at the same time I was going through so much hell at Pasnaz in the beginning. We have this mega church, which was the church that we all looked to, that we elevated. Like, we went to conferences to learn how to be this church. And at the same time, they were measuring the wrong thing. Mm-hmm. Things were crumbling behind the scenes. And it turned out that there was just a lot of heartache, even just beyond with what happened with Bill Hybels. There was just a lot of heartache and pain in some of the systems and structures. And so I think that one of the biggest things that's happening is we have chosen success. We have chosen, metrics, meaning butts in the seat, likes, followers, glossy looks, glossy narrative, marketing plans, brands at the expense of faithfulness. Yeah, absolutely. And I'm speaking for myself and chime in, but I would assume that there is a place for, good strategies in church communities, absolutely. Right? And working through strategic plan in church right now, and it's good. Like we do need to be faithful to some of that work.
Yeah. Because what I have heard over the years, and maybe I even held some of this early on in my own journey of kind of wrestling with some of these issues, is, faithfulness means a community needs to just be super organic and look like this, or, it can't look like church almost, and I think that might be true in some contexts. Yeah. But there's something deeper than just format of church. It's this spirit of what are we putting at the center? Is it these outputs? Is it these kind of like you're saying, like the things that come out after we pull the lever, or is it the radiance of Jesus? And I think you're just calling that out so well. Yeah. So talk about some of the other issues going on right now as you kind of have thoughts gathered. I mean, we're coming off of course, this Capitol riot. We're coming off a year of COVID that still is going on. I think in my state, I'm looking at early summer before I get a vaccine, which is, it's fine, but also a bummer. It's not, the end isn't here yet. There's also the reality of racial injustice that's come to the forefront, at least culturally, in a new way.
Yes.
And these are all dynamics that church communities are having to choose, preferred narratives or could lean into radiance. And I'm curious, do you have signs of hope that you're seeing? And also, what are some signs that we are missing the mark in these areas?
Yeah, sure. Well, I think, some signs of hope is that things are being torn down in a sense. We do need to go through some really healthy deconstruction. I think, and again, this is the tension that I'm holding is I think we need to go through deconstruction, but we also need to rebuild.
Yeah.
My concern is I'm seeing so many young people deconstruct. And they're so far down the road.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think, the opportunity before us is there is deconstruction. The storming the Capitol is gut wrenching. And for the first time, I am seeing people who couldn't see things all of a sudden start to see, maybe things weren't right after all. Maybe things were off. Maybe we have missed the mark. And so I believe that, and that is a hopeful sign for me. And sometimes I see people doubling down and even more
totally.
And who knows how much, more severe this polarization is going to get. But I think this is an opportunity for us to come together and say, okay, what does the church actually look like? And I think it's going to look rugged. It's going to look different. I think there's rubble and we're down to a stump. But when there's a stump, when there's rubble, that's when new things, that's when signs of spring begin to burst forth. And that's when just this kind of apostolic leadership can really rise up. I think we've been in and I appreciate Alan Hirsch so much with APAS and his, what he has gifted the church and just kind of putting in our faces this, apostolic leader, prophet, teacher, evangelist, shepherd. And I think we've been going through such a season of where the prophets have really been speaking out. And, the prophetic voices are there. And just as a sidebar, I think I do get concerned as a pastor that sometimes we confuse Twitter influencer call out culture and cancel culture from prophetic voices.
Absolutely.
I think in some ways that has hijacked the prophets, but there are prophets out there and this is a season of prophets. And so I want to say, praise God for that. Things are getting torn down. Deconstruction is happening. Now, where are the apostolic leaders and the shepherds and the teachers that are going to be able to step into this place where things have been torn down and teach a healthy ecclesiology, theology, pneumatology, just all the ologies, shepherd the people back to healing, and shepherd the people into the path of reconciliation, where, the shepherds that are going to call people towards lament, call the people towards confession, call the people towards, turning into a new way, repentance. And so, and then where are the evangelists then once we get our crap together? They're going to be able to go out there and say, look at the radiance of the church. We are new. And so I think that's what's hopeful for me. I think we're just in these early stages where things are, and then a lot more is going to get torn down, unfortunately. And it's going to be really hard and really painful. But I want to see the apostolic leaders and the shepherds and the teacher begin to rise up and be just as loud as the prophets.
Wow. I think that's a prophetic word. I think that to me speaks so much. Wow. I'm going to be holding that. Yeah. Thank you for that. And
thank you
and
to
you bring up,
Ellen
what's
Hirsch.
that?
And thanks to Alan Hirsch for constantly putting this in our faces.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I remember one of the early books I read when we were going to plant a church was The Shaping of Things to Come, and how much that book just rocked me and opened up things. Yeah.
That book just blew my mind. I read that early on too, and I just was eating it up. So excited.
Yeah. Yeah. And you brought up a really important subject that I think is can be icky, I guess is one way to put it. Evangelism. It's I think when I was teen, college, it was kind of like, man, we need to get rid of these methods, right? Like we need to get rid of the 4 spiritual laws. I remember a lot of this in seminary. There's got to be new ways to talk about the gospel. And now in a lot of contexts, even the nicest, most polished, kingdom-centric presentation of gospel is offensive. It's difficult, I think, for people who live in this tension of, hey, we know we have messed up. Like we are not that radiant thing. Maybe pockets of us are trying, but like we know there's a huge reputation problem. And so to even step into evangelism, it seems really risky.
Yes.
Yet at the other end of it, I feel like it's a lost art. And this is something I've only come to really appreciate coming through the journey as a church planter who came here, with certain sort of like, I'm done with all of that stuff. And now realizing, no, like there are people who need Jesus and just owning that as really central. And so what do we do with all that tension? Because that's a lot.
Yeah, the pendulum has swung so far away. I mean, evangelism it's a dirty word.
Mm-hmm.
It's a dirty word in seminaries, for students. There's just a cynicism towards it. It's been called an act of violence.
Mm-hmm.
It is a dirty word in a lot of ways for some people. And what I want to see is that reclaimed. It doesn't have to be dirty.
Yeah.
And when I say reclaimed, like I don't want to return to, the 4 spiritual laws and hitting people over the head, so as though evangelism is a cognitive proposition.
Yeah.
I'm not talking about that kind of evangelism. I'm talking, it is, a conversation, but I am talking about something different, something real, something deeply relational, something that is born out of a witness, something born out of a life, and so I'm so concerned in the ways where like in some circles, we can't even talk about evangelism.
Yeah.
And then the other end, again, like in the other end of the pendulum, it's let's bring evangelism back, And
yeah.
Just this indignation about it, and even the approach about like storming the streets.
Mm-hmm.
And so I want to call, when I wrote that chapter on evangelism, I think I called it a radiant evangelism. I just wanted to, again, just kind of bring us back, from these 2 pendulum just ends that we've taken ourselves to, and to again imagine something different, something fresh.
Yeah,
something that looks like Jesus, something relational, embodied.
Oh my gosh, yeah, and that image of a city on a hill comes to mind when I think of your book. I mean, as a whole, and especially this idea, what would it look like to actually radiate love and life and alternative beauty? And it seems as though that's attractive. It seems that has been one of the major things that has attracted people, at least throughout history of the church, when it wasn't, swords.
Yeah, right.
Right. Forcing people to make a good idea, their own idea, so that they didn't die or get excluded in some way. But like the best versions of conversion that we've ever seen have been, there's something so beautiful about Jesus or that community, Yeah,
that's right.
Yeah.
That's right. There's an attractional thing about it that it's different. It's, what they were looking for. It was what they were longing for. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Well, I think you really captured it well. And kind of have 2 thoughts that I'll just pair together as we kind of transition towards our close. But I love that towards the end of the book, you talk about practices, and you named several. I'll throw out the ones that I wrote down. Talk about like lamenting. You bring in racism in that setting, if I remember right. Listening to people as a practice of being a radiant follower of Christ. Eating with others. During this season, of course, eating is interesting because we don't get to do it, at least not close in proximity.
Yeah.
But what's a practice that you'd say, in light of a lot that has been happening, the turmoil, the struggles, not just like the news cycle struggles, but people are depressed, people are afraid, all of the stuff we're holding in this moment culturally. Is there a practice or two that you think we could find some cathartic mileage here and some wisdom here?
Yeah, I think lament is huge. And I mean, thank goodness for the, Roz book, Prof. Roz book, Prophetic Lament. I think that was a really groundbreaking book for all of us, because lament has been lost in the church. And, I'm even watching that now in some spaces, in some circles, with everything that after the Capitol, it's kind of like nothing to see here. Like, let's just all move along, like, praise Jesus, and yes, it's Jesus. And also, how long, O Lord? We need to take the posture where we are actually weeping over the state of the church. And letting ourselves feel it, letting our bodies actually feel it.
Some of us don't gravitate towards that body feeling stuff.
No,
I mean, that's hard, you know?
And, and it comes out in other ways, as we know. There's so much research about this, right? When we don't let ourselves mourn, when we don't let ourselves lament, what happens? It comes out in depression, comes out in anxiety, it comes out in anger. Have you seen anger lately? I have. It's a little bit, and so I just think that the practice of lament is honesty before God. And we're not very honest right now. We want everyone to move along. There's nothing to see. This is just going to go away. Well, this is not going to go away. And so I think that when we lament, we are connecting with the heart of God who sees us just in all of this mess. Listening as well. I just see so many, and by the way, I should preface too, I don't know if we've said this, but in front of the book, like I talk about, I am a child of white evangelicalism. That's just what I was born into. And so this book, when I say listen, I am talking to us white evangelicals in general who need to listen. And so we really need to listen and understand, the church's participation in history towards some really toxic, harmful things. And so we need to listen and understand and learn very humbly. We can't eat with people, but we can walk our neighborhoods. We can walk our communities, and we can pray through our communities with the eyes open, and learn if we can exegete our communities. We can all order Chipotle or whatever it is, our food of choice, and have a Zoom dinner.
There it is. Yes.
Order from the same place. But I just think that we need to, for me growing up, I was taught about important practices such as prayer, Bible study, journal. But I think we need to start lifting up some other practices that we need to begin introducing and get those. And they're talked about. Everything I've said in this book is nothing new. I'm just a shepherd. I write it as a pastor, and I want to see the church be who Jesus believes we can be.
Yeah. And that leads me to my last thought here that I was going to tie in, that it sounds like that's your hope. Like for this book, your hope is that people will learn to be the church so that they can show others the best radiant Jesus-shaped church that is actually possible. Right?
That's right. I want to see revival. Kurt, I was joking earlier on a call with someone else. I said, I feel like I'm going to be the last person standing, like when it comes to just hopefulness and belief in the church. And this crazy idea of revival, renewing, I think it's possible. I don't think it's going to be easy to get there.
Yeah.
But I believe in it.
Oh, I think we need those voices of hope that remind us, because in our own isolation and our own struggles, I'm sure that so many people are like, I can't see it. But would in the same breath often say, but thank you to those who are helping me believe it, so thank you for that. And I share that hope. Depending on the day, it is somewhere on the low end of the scale or abundant, and sometimes in the same day, it's both of those things. So, wow. Well, hey, I just really appreciate your time and this book and what you're up to. And of course, I want to give opportunity for you to share how do folks track your work and next steps if they want to come from this podcast to your writing beyond. Yeah.
Thanks. Yeah, they can find information at tarbethleach.com. I've never had a newsletter before, but I am. You can sign up for one. We're going to start one.
Awesome.
I'm on Twitter, tarbeth82. Instagram is the same handle, and then Facebook as well. And hey, I just want to tell you, we've got, for the launch day for this book, we're going to have a really exciting event that I'm super excited about. It's not been promoted or even said anywhere publicly yet, but there'll be more information about that soon. So
wow.
Check out my socials and website for more information to come.
Awesome. Well, hey, it's such a gift to have you with us. We'll do it again. And in the meanwhile, thanks. And hope you have a good rest of your day, good rest of your week.
Yeah, thanks, Kurt. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening to Theology Curator. For more resources from Kurt Willems, check out theologycurator.com/newsletter to sign up for our email update list. For new listeners of the podcast, we hope you will subscribe via iTunes, Google, or your podcast manager of choice. If you like what you hear, please leave the show a review. For regular listeners, consider supporting Kurt's online ministry at patreon.com/Kurt Willems. Lastly, please don't let this conversation end when the episode is over. We hope you feel empowered in regular life to explore theology and faith in intelligent and humanizing ways.